Welcome to Pass It On. This podcast is organized by the International Humanity Foundation, IHF, where we dive into inspiring stories of individuals dedicated to passing on kindness and hope. I'm your host, Darius, and in each episode, we'll explore the journeys of volunteers from all around the globe who have joined IHF. Previously on Pass It On.
I was 12. I had a godfather who was renowned as a psychiatrist for children and was being abused sexually. And so I felt I would rather take a chance on making it or not making it on the streets, and that no one would believe me. One of the promises I made myself as I boarded the plane that I had babysit and house kept in order to earn the money for. And as I got on that plane, I thought, if I don't make it, I don't make it. But if I do, I swear to God, I will do everything I can with whatever success or power I can ever get to survive to make sure others don't go through this. Yeah, darling.
Okay, Ma, with this question for you that said that you indicated that starting an NGO like IHF can be like IHF, but any NGO without substantial funds is visible. How did you navigate these challenges while establishing the foundation of an NGO with limited resources?
Oh, excellent question. Oh, good. I was a single parent with all the kind of stuff that goes with that, trying to get through graduate school, which meant I was working several jobs as what's called work study program in the US, and a mother needing to make sure I had time with my child, and doing over full-time classwork because I had a scholarship that was going to end, and it would cover however many classes I was taking. So I had truly overextended myself at the point I had made that challenge that we discussed to Stanberry, the director of admissions for WSU, my university, and two people in my classroom who were talking very negatively about the poor are poor in the US because they're lazy and there's no excuse and blah, blah, blah. And I tried to give myself as an example, which was very embarrassing for me. But I felt such a strong emotion at the gap of misunderstanding. And yes, there are many like that, but there are many more that are working as hard as I am working, and those I know that are harder. And that passion that they somehow hear the voices of these people and understand, and that these people are offered the same opportunity to explain and voice via education that I was being offered in the classroom. So I had no money. I would go literally be without food by the end of the month in order to make sure my son had food. And it was true struggling, uh, but determination that somehow I was going to make it through this. And then once making it through and getting these awards, even though I was still financially strapped and hungry the end of every month, not wanting people to know that, to be honest, in that classroom was difficult, but also liberating. That turned into the home program. And the home program was made up of other people just like myself, single mothers, sometimes single fathers, trying to somehow, how do you raise yourself up through the classes, through the economic barriers, if you don't have the money, the time, nor the skills to do so? Does it mean that you're lazy and stupid? How do you do that? And once you feel hopeless, what is that malaise that envelops you like a fog where you have no energy and you feel lazy and you're lazy because you're hopeless and exhausted? I wanted not only the professors and educated at my university, but also those that I had been a young teen on the streets with, and those that I was in food lines with, to also understand this isn't them. That fog of no energy and feeling you're stupid and lazy isn't them. It's the situation. Let's experiment. Just give me a month of your time and let me go over with you a simple way of thinking that will seem not wise, because you can't survive emergencies if you only focus on A to B to C and don't let your mind go anywhere else. You won't survive. But in academia and in that world that suddenly propels you to the higher limits, they have the luxury of only going A to B to C and blocking everything out while they do. So hard for mamas with lots of children. And it's that type of thinking that helped me, with the same brain that could not pass a high school test, to then win all these awards in universities and take the most classes of anyone in its histories and get the A's, etc. Same brain that couldn't even pass the simplest tests. And it was learning particular skills. And I believe it's the same thing when we're discussing any skills. We can't define ourselves by the situations we're in and our stories. Let me just see if I can teach you this. And so I did with a few people. There was only 2 guys and 18 women, and they were wonderful. One of them, Tom Hune, was from Vietnam and had seen his mother and sister raped in the boat and then killed, and he had jumped off and made it. And he's just ended up the most amazing adult human being. All these people, Eunice, who was one of the first women, ended up being a anesthesiologist and helping nurse and helping IHF many years later, going to the Jakarta Center and helping them and leading the Red Crescent in countries. So they went on, but they were kind of my first group, and none of us had any money. We just didn't have it. Daniela and we would kind of collect everyone's food and make what called Balagar Botch, that was my maiden name, and make the soup out of whatever was left, trying to survive. So the very essence and beginning of my doing social movement work or nonprofit work was with us being broke. I mean, that was the start. And it was just using our voices and learning and falling over each other and learning. And then learning, because we were all sharing a house together, learning that we had to keep politics, because our politics were so different, completely out of it. So certain structures begot themselves as we were living together and decided the most important for us to achieve this is to be loving to each other and not let our personalities drag us down into the ditches fighting each other, or we're not going to make it. We have to help each other in our studies, help each other with our children, help each other as single mothers to somehow get through this. So that first experiment in that house in Pullman, Washington, was with all of us completely broke, but we made it. And that sharing love was so important. Now, when I got the grant to go overseas, for my doctoral dissertation and study how do women move through the classes, and men also, but I was primarily focused on women. How do they move through the classes in other cultures? And for me, it was a basic question. It was, how do we do that without having to do it through the bed of a man if education isn't accessible, or it's not what we are good at? What exists out there other than through the bed of a man, so that we have the freedom to love, and so that men have the freedom to know that they're with somebody because they are loved by that person versus for their money. Everyone gets a win-win out of this. So how is this possible? And is it possible and the children still get enough attention and nurturing and not pay the price for it if women are becoming educated and working? It was a concern of mine because children are my passion and they need a lot of attention and love to blossom properly. So that was my research. That was the simplification of what my reason for traveling to different countries was. At the point I left overseas, I had not yet won the presidential award. I was not yet with the doing the thing. I knew some governors because our group sprouted up in different universities, which is why I believe in word of mouth. So they sprouted up in different universities, and then the university presidents would want to know about it, and they would mention it to their governors and state legislatures. So it was getting around by the end of its second year. Um, and then I got that grant and I went overseas, which was also comforting to me because I had a lot of people, not a lot, but I had people marching against me, including, which broke my heart, the Women's Center. The Women's Center itself, um, who were who were feminists and fellow, were marching against me because I was accepting equally and promoting women, very religious women, women of all backgrounds and all religions, and they wanted it to be a only women who believe like this are a part of it, and I refused that, and I kept it no politics, which I've always done, and so that tension made me glad to go overseas, but remember, very little money. So as I was going overseas and doing this research, I was surprised that the work I had done with home, and which I try to teach now, where I had used being a part of home, well, starting home, as an avenue to interview people that I had admired and wanted to learn from in my life. I used introducing what we were doing as an avenue of that. And then my university president, who, as I explained, had become a friend from my, we had a conflict and became friends. He taught me who to CC and how to CC it so that the presidents would read it and these people I admired would get past the secretaries and read it. So I had that knowledge and background, but I was struggling to just have food even while I was able to fly to these places on this grant. Um, so coming across sexual slavery and being taken myself and having Ramu killed and those children we were trying to rescue killed, and getting to know my beloved Asa and Api, some of the first sexual slaves in Pim Pom, only 10 years old, up there on the bar, sliding all these sexual movements that in a bikini with bright makeup. That I didn't care that I didn't have money. I didn't care that I didn't know how to start it and was already overwhelmed by home going on, and that everyone, including the university presidents and governors, were saying you cannot take on anything else. I didn't give a, excuse the language, but shit. I don't know why shit is a bad word. Everyone does it, but I just didn't care. All I cared was this cannot be happening and not even discussed anywhere, and no one even knows about it. It's rampant everywhere. How is this possible that in our educated world that I'm clinging to as my means of communication has such huge gaps, not only in terms of the poor in my own country, in the US, where those gaps are misunderstood by the decision makers, and those that experience those gaps have no voice of influence with the decision makers, which is why I later talked Reagan, of all people, into having them on his committees. So we had street children, prostitutes, sex workers, and there is a difference between the two. Everyone giving feedback, prisoners, female prisoners, male prisoners, giving feedback and policies of how can we streamline and save the government money so they'd want to, while giving clearer answers and less roadblocks to becoming self-sufficient and self-empowered in their lives. And that now transferring to what I was experiencing on this trip of massive trafficking of humans unseen was overwhelming to me. And in my earlier life, um, I went from being a street child from 12 to 15 to at 16, and I won't go into how, I ended up living with nuns and being a part of the Vatican's Second Council and the UN's Ecumenical Council. So I got to know the UN president and some individuals at a young age. Because of that, even while I was struggling to try to be educated. It was just an odd situation. And it was only temporary, and then my life continued onward. But I reached back to those encounters to try to get some help also. And one of them is a royal princess. And again, just happenstance from my earlier life. And I didn't think they would answer. One was one of the wealthiest families in the world that I thought would never answer this kid or even remember me. And in reaching back, I did get the response of, if this existed, we would know about it. And that same response from the Oprah show, from everyone who had wanted me on their shows about home. If this existed, we would know about it. So I felt, even though I had no money, I felt that same voicelessness I felt as a child, where my godfather is so admired and this wonderful children's psychiatrist. How can anyone ever believe what he's doing to me? And I'll just be called crazy and weird. That voicelessness arises in me when I see any child or population made voiceless and their dignity stripped, their humanness that's so sacred and precious, and we're all connected to, being stripped. So I didn't care. I didn't have any money. I just had to do something. It wasn't a thinking thing. It was no different than when the house is on fire. You get everyone out of that so they don't catch on fire. It was that same thing. That's how the social movements began without money because we didn't have money. So we had to figure out ways of doing it. You know how we did it with home? Everyone donated $1 a month. And so this is in the days of no phone to exchange money. So we got mail bags full of mail with $1. And we had postmen having to bring these big bags to my house. And I told him, this is what's going on. He started volunteering. We got others volunteering because they were so amazed that so many women in the US wanted to donate $1 at a time. So my thought was, I feel a sense of duty. And I am realizing on this world trip for the first time how powerful I really am in this world and what is wrong with me as a woman if I don't learn more how to use that power to help these women and walk away. What part of me will die forever if I do that? How does that even make sense in this world? So it was with that same feeling that when I miraculously was able to come back to the US, which is a whole other story. Air India took all my luggage trying to get a hold of the film and documents I had in London. Horrible stuff happened, and it was a whole story. But I ended up, thanks to an amazing lawyer in India. He and his wife literally put their lives on line for me. I ended up back home and arriving home with the plans to meet my mother with my son at Disneyland. And in this little boat ride the next morning, where the boat ride at Disneyland was singing It's a Small, Small World After All, which my son still remembers now that he's in his 40s when mom came home. And he was singing. It was his favorite song after that. It's a small, small world after all. Well, you know the meaning of that song. It's a small, small world after all. And realizing I have so much more power than I ever understood, and it can do so much more good than I ever understood, as long as I don't identify my ego with it and define myself by what works or doesn't work. I was keenly aware on that It's a Small, Small World ride at Disneyland that I will not survive mentally. I have no money. And the darkness of it all, I won't survive if I attach myself to the results. I just have to do this and focus on the beauty, like my son laughing on this ride, like my finger in the water, like my mom beside me, the glowing of everything. I'm alive. I'm alive. I made it. I'm alive. I have to hold on to this feeling, not to the ugliness and not to results, but I have to do this. And I have more power than I ever understood. And in a way I never understood before this trip, this also brings a deeper type of joy and happiness than I understood at the same time. And it's not a happiness from feeling like I have more power. It's not a happiness from I made it, I'm alive. It's not a happiness from I have this wonderful son and mother next to me. No, it's just connection with life, connection with people, that river. There's no other joy that's as deep. And that moment helped me to understand, if I'm going to do this, it's going to have to be like home, because people won't believe us. There has to be a reason that it's been allowed to get this big without media even being aware. and it's too dark for people to take in. So I'm going to have to look at long-term solutions, the deeper root solutions. And like with home, how can it be done with the people who don't aren't real wealthy, with the people who feel this connection and on the little money they have, because then something can spread and move forward. So from its very conception, it was that. In practicality, what does it mean? In practicality, it means a lot of the corrupt feel that they can shove us around, and that's just human nature and will always be. So there's no point in even spending time on that. It just is, and you just accept that. And you'll be vulnerable to that because you don't have the almighty powerful scaring them off. You're saying it's us connected. Okay, let that flow. Know that those waves will come and whew, and will kind of gulp, gulp, gulp and swim to the top again. Okay, keep going because the thing that's beautiful is so beautiful, it will keep us going. That's how we begin. In practicality, it also means we don't spend money on PR. In practicality, it means we just focus on word of mouth, what each person experiences, and don't worry about the rumors and the gossip and all that, or we'll get lost because it's going to be a lot. That's just going to happen if we're trying to make this change. All right. How else can we spread communication? That's how it began. It began with kind of the Balaguer botch soup. It began with putting all our leftover food at the end of the month together and trying to make it into something we can all eat, because otherwise you just have two potatoes in the closet. And potatoes alone, we want to share the food. It's that concept from the very beginning. And it continues in IHF. The doing the good is sending what we general online outreach team. Now that we have internet helping us, it's so much easier than it was when we were having to do it one on one. And there's a lot of stories of problems that came up and how we solved them. But for this time here in this question, it is we did it without money because we realized we were the experts and we had more power from our pain and expertise than we ever realized. And if we join hands and share and teach each other and pass it on, we can make the change in spite of not having money. And that's why we do like the ads that don't cost money. That's why we do the we're all volunteering and donating, but we have to be respectful of our time and our amounts. That's why we have the rules that we have and we're set up as we are. Does that answer the question, or did I not answer it?
No, it answered the question, and that's really amazing. And it's a new insight for me because I never thought that it will be possible to do that, to starting an NGO without substantial funds. And from that story, your story, it is possible. And that's really
Oh, yes.
inspiring stories and insight for me. Thank you so much. So I will move to the next question. For the next question, I really want to ask, so because you have traveled to many countries and meet many people with different cultures, what are some of the differences between countries and cultures that have surprised or amused you?
Oh my gosh, I could talk for 10 hours and never stop on this. And we're going to run out of time if I do that. So I'm going to try really hard to give a brief answer, but oh, I love these stories because they're just so funny and delightful. All right, let's see. Give a few quick, Carol. I guess the one for Westerners to understand and others to understand that are trying to deal with Westerners. That whereas in some cultures, to look your boss right in the eyes or shake the hand firmly while looking in the eyes and hold that hand for a moment, is disrespectful. And to lower your eyes shows respect. For Western culture and even around the world, one of the simplest things you can do in international status is to use your eyes and to look the person straight in the eyes calmly and dip into those eyes and let the other person fidget. It does not show disrespect, it shows a higher class. You don't do it in an intimidating way. You do it in a manner that says, I am listening to you because you are fascinating. And that you do that not with people beneath you, equal to you, or above you, but with everyone. That is an empowering movement that I didn't understand. And when I was exhausted and feeling no confidence in myself, I couldn't handle dealing with people's eyes and being noticed. I just couldn't handle that. And I needed to be taught that and actually practice that as a technique to realize how universally empowering that is. Now, if you do that in some countries, you will create problems for yourself. Um, if you do that uh, in with police in some countries, you're drawing attention, and they will come and start asking you questions. In the US, I always make contact with police and wave at them because they are so happy and startled by it, and then are super friendly to me if ever needed for an occasion. But there are countries where I just would not want to draw that attention to myself. I am not saying this across the board culturally. I am just saying that generally your upper class, just as your upper class who have old money or are used to being in power positions don't flaunt jewelry. They do that only if it's an occasion where they're supposed to. But in day to day life, anyone who flaunts a lot of jewelry and gaudiness and heavy, people feel are trying to draw attention or are new to power and wanting to flaunt it and kind of look down on, because that simplicity, wearing clothes of quality but simplicity, understated, is important. That kind of junk, and it's just language, it's junk. It's like certain words you use and certain words you don't. It's just junk stuff. It's so helpful to learn because it shortcuts stuff. And people are amazing in how much they will classify someone by first impressions. I'm amazed at it, but it's true. And so, looking in the eyes generally, even though that is so rude to do in many cultures, even in those cultures, if you're educated and have traveled the world, you know to look people in eyes. And so, therefore, they immediately assume you are a more sophisticated person. So, that's one thing. The other is if people are mad and upset at you and you don't know why, and they're talking very polite, but you feel something is wrong, but you don't understand. Do not assume it's your personality and you. It can be as simple as, oh, there's so many examples. Hopping down the stairs of my home in Bali, where some men were sitting, and I'm hopping down the stairs and they all leave and they don't come for the ceremony that was really hard for me to do because they wanted a roasted pig and I had a pet pig. So it was so hard for me to do, but I honored the ceremony and then they didn't come. And I was sure it was mistakes I had made because I do so often. Um, And instead, I found out much later when I finally sat down with someone and we went over everything and I tried to figure out why. It's because to hop downstairs where the men are standing was to say, I don't like you, because if it was a menstrual period, I would have given them all bad luck. And I had no idea and hadn't taken the time. This was when I was young enough to still have menstrual periods. I hadn't taken the time to understand the culture, and that they did not realize, um, to them, it was beyond fathomable that I wouldn't understand. If you're working with um, very poor and outer villages, do not put down and think it's not important to learn what you consider superstitions. Because believe me, each of us have superstitions that we consider not superstitions and don't even know it. Do not put that down. That's not going to help anyone. And so you do want to talk to people and not just assume politics and build up dramas, assuming things, because they can easily build up when you're working between cultures. And then you laugh and laugh when you find out what it really was. And it happens so often to everyone. And drama gets built very quickly. Don't let the drama get built. So there are a zillion humorous ones. When Danny went to Prague, he was up all night. I couldn't convince him that Americans and Europeans and those in Prague, they're not killing all the trees. He was certain that they were dying everywhere. And he kept watering them during the night, so that I wouldn't see, because he didn't really believe me that there's such a thing as deciduous trees that lose all their leaves, and it doesn't mean they're dead. And he just couldn't fathom it. And it was even to this day, as Danny's leading the Medin Center, even though it's what 30 years later. All I need to say is deciduous trees. Understanding something. And then there's the opposite thing, and that is where I could not fathom. I just didn't believe it when they said that the number one cause of death are falling coconuts. And I just would romanticize and love it and walk. And I didn't walk carefully until someone I loved got hit by a coconut and died. I just could not believe it. And I thought they were teasing me. So there's a lot to be understood that sometimes we just can't to begin with. Let's see, cultural traits I love that stayed with me and helped me so much, because I have a very, I think it's from the childhood abuse. I have a very reactive and over temperamental, reactive personality. I'm very, your artist emotional type. It's really been to my detriment, to everyone's detriment. And it took me many years to learn to go with the waves and not kick all over when they come. So one of the things culturally that has really helped me is starting to fathom the difference of, we can move anywhere in the US. I can move anywhere in the world. I can go anywhere. So I can stand up and say, well, this is my truth and what I believe, and I will tell the truth. And understanding that for most of humankind's history, and for most humans on this planet still, that's not true. And if they belong to a tribe or a culture or a family, you can't just move and still be independent and okay in the way we all are able to be transitory as a way of life. Transitory for much of the world is detrimental to devastating. And the methods for getting along with each other, and the tribal politics between tribes that Westerners put down as somehow primitive. It's so funny to see how quickly they will start fighting if criticized at all by their neighbor or anyone else. And I think, oh my God, if they did not have the freedom to leave anywhere and move anywhere, they would never make it because they don't have some of the very skills we put down for nations that have tribal fractions. They don't have those skills and have no concept that they're lacking those skills. For example, the ability to start laughing when there's tension and just have jokes between each other to have things die down, and the agreement of that. In nomadic tribes that I've lived with, there is in all of them this common sitting in silence with each other and using more senses than just sight and hearing that are so prominent in my birth culture. You sit for a long time getting to know each other's smells and in silence, and there's something so beautiful about that that I miss. There are certain parts of the nomadic living that were very hard and traumatizing for me, and certain parts that I really miss. And that's one of them. We don't smell each other. I felt it fascinating when I couldn't get home soon enough to get to my mother when I found out that she had had a blood clot and needed emergency surgery, and they were worried for her life and would I make it in time. And the first thing I did instinctively was smell her arm. And I couldn't take that in enough. I just couldn't stop smelling her arm. And I realized, it doesn't matter where we're born. Some of the things that are the norms in nomadic culture are still not completely lost in each of us, no matter what cultures we come from. We are all symbiotic animals. And I still, to this day, that smell of her arm, it was alive. I could smell it despite the medication smell. I could smell her soul. There are the laughing when the place went up on fire, and on the island that where I was living and working with, the place went up on fire, and the coconut shells that you keep piled up on the side were popping in the air. And I was sobbing, thinking only of, oh my God, all the artwork that we had made over a year to have shipped to our store in La Jolla. And oh my God, it's all lost. And I was sobbing, and they were laughing and laughing at the laughing, and I started laughing. It helped me so much, that laughter. And then I started noticing children do a lot of these things naturally, even when they're starting to fight with each other when they're very young. They'll suddenly start laughing or figure out how to. I noticed some things thinking, wow, how stupid of us. We'd never get along in the West when we can't even get along with our relatives because we've lost some of these instincts. So that another one was with in Picot, when it's such dry desert, when the rains come, which you never think they will ever, 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 just dry, 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 hard. It of course floods immediately. And they had told me, but I didn't understand that any place could flood that big and vast that quickly. It just, of course, it seeps in. Oh, it doesn't at all? Wait. And I didn't understand. And so our new medical van, and we had in it all the computers, the equipment for the borehole we were digging for the well where they're literally dying from lack of water. I was devastated, and there it went. And then the kids just started laughing and laughing. I think Chimerack and some of them were there with me, so they'll hear this and start laughing as they remember. So there it is, bopping in the river, boop, 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 and the computer's bopping, and they're laughing and laughing. That helped me, the ability to laugh, even when our beloved dog died, and Kadek made some joke about the dog because the dog used to poop in the house or something, and well, heaven will be full of poop. And I just, it's I there, and she made some other joke and started laughing. And at first, I felt that's ugly. How can you laugh like that? And then pretty soon, I saw was helping my daughter who was devastated, and she started laughing. That use of laughter is one of the difference in cultures. There's much about the culture I'm in, born to, that I love. I love the fact it doesn't matter what family we're born into. I love that we can look stupid in order to learn something and don't have to always look good and then be made fun of it. There are some things I love, but there are other things that I'm sad that we've lost. I could go on for hours and hours. This is an endless topic to me, so I'll shut up, darling.
Thank you so much. I was really giggling. Thank you. And that was really, really
There's so many.
it's a nice story. And I like the part with your mother. And my regards. I know she doesn't
Yes.
know me, but my regards to her and the dog as well. I love them. But do you have some time for one more question for today?
Yes, yes. Let me see the time. Oh, we've got 5 minutes. Let's see if Blabbermouth Grandma can do it. Okay,
Okay.
what's the question? Otherwise, we'll continue in next week's. What's the question, darling?
Okay, I'm an African and you have a center in Kenya. So I'd like to know, just like Sylvia asked the one for Indonesia, what motivated this decision and why Kenya specifically?
All right, sweetie. We went Kenya, specifically, the quick answer is because the corruption and trafficking of humans, when you follow the string and follow the tail, I kept coming back to Kenya for that trafficking that takes place in Africa, which isn't as it's very different, dependent on the country and continent. It kept coming to Kenya, and that's I think because of the UN. Thank goodness for the UN being headquartered there for so long and so much flowing out from there, that as with anywhere, then that attracts con artists. So that's the quick answer in our 5 minutes. The longer answer I'll have to explain next week is that my daughter wanted to go on a safari, and we went on that safari, and what we experienced on that safari and the aftermath of what happened at the Hilton. My daughter turned to me and said, "Mommy, we have to do something here." And so that's the longer answer. I don't have time to answer. So there you go. And to think she was what, 7 years old, and now she's what, 35, 36. I was like,
Catch up on all the heartwarming moments and inspiring stories from our previous episodes of Partiton. Join the discussion and immerse yourself in the journey of kindness and goodwill towards humanity. Tune into our podcast on YouTube at IHF Online and Spotify at Bridges of Humanity. Don't miss out on spreading positivity and making a difference. Pass it on.
Next on, pass it on. Well, before we wrap up today's podcast, if you remember, I told you this morning, was yesterday, that we have a surprise for you. I know that
you have a surprise. You guys are my surprise. What's the surprise? Says this old woman. Speaking of women, what?
Turning my dreams into reality within a year, Mama, you have built my skills and confidence from the ground up, loving us like a mother and guiding us like a
but her belief in us and her passion for helping children in need truly inspired me a lot. And I learned a lot of things from her.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity and for your guidance and support. I am deeply grateful for the positive impact you have.
My precious love. I'm speechless, darlings. I'm your blabbermouth is speechless. Oh my gosh, my darlings. I'm sorry, I can't talk. The tears are just flowing. My sweet loves. Thank you all so much. I'm so blessed.